coming off of FVL, we heard from OEMs, certainly our partners in the asset community, and a wide swath of stakeholders in the business that chip shortages are certainly starting to recede. I know parts shortages still persist in some corners of the marketplace, but I think everyone sort of collectively nodded that a return of normalcy is starting to take hold within the business, but certainly we're not back to 2019 by any stretch of the imagination. The automotive ecosystem continues to struggle with production challenges. Obviously, we're in the EV switchover that's bringing forth all sorts of different challenges within the space, and I think it'll be interesting to hear from the supplier base what they think the future will hold across the industry.
Well, looking at the future of the auto industry, there's so many unknowns right now. I mean, I look back, I've been in this space for a bit, and we used to look at two things to kind of get an idea of what was going to happen in the automotive sector. We looked at how many vehicles are being sold in North America and how many vehicles are being produced in North America. Well, now that they've added a lot to that conversation, you're talking about what's the mix between EV and between combustion engines. You know, where is the market going from mobility? I mean, you have a lot of people talking about consumers changing their buying habits in general. Then you got, Mexico and resourcing from China potentially and nearshoring. How is that going to impact the market? So, there's so many different factors today that you have to consider where years ago those weren't even in play.
What's it going to do to load factor? What type of requirements are going to be to hauling those components, right? Is it going to be hazmat? Is it going to require different type of weight restrictions? Those challenges are going to be on both the inbound and the outbound side.
And you look at parts, the average combustible engine, the cars we're buying today, there's between 10,000 and 12,000 parts on those vehicles. When you look at an EV, it's got half the parts, 40% less parts. So how does that change, the dynamic of the supply base and how the OEMs buy and how we're impacted by that?
I think we've seen it with a few products that are coming out that are in their early stages. They're waiting on those components to build out certain vehicles, and it makes it a challenge for both the inbound and the outbound side. There's trucks waiting for these products to ship them, and there's quite a significant delay, or their products go on hold, they're not ready to ship yet, and it causes a lot of chaos. And it requires us to stay in constant communication with the shippers, with the trucking companies, or it's going to just eat us alive.
And I'll also add that John alluded to it earlier, but effectively the nearshoring or the supply chain change that the automotive ecosystem is undergoing, with moving potentially away from China, looking at Mexico as a way to drive at similar labor costs, but having parts cycles much closer to manufacturing and certainly speeding up that cycle. We find ourselves at this weird intersection of coming out of COVID, globalization, a lot of people are saying, is not going to look like it did prior to COVID. And I mean, when you look at the cost to ship things on an ocean container, that has changed how people are calculating where they're going to put a supply base. Government policies in foreign countries is another way in which they're reconsidering the supply base. And I think all of that adds up to an industry that's going through its own product evolution and now is looking at a supply evolution as a part of that. And that's also causing a lot of disruption. And they're wondering, what this is all going to look like.
About Mexico, as we move forward this year and into next year, I think it's going to be critical what we see coming out of there as far as your ability to not only bring parts in, but to move vehicles out. That, to me, is the biggest challenge I see. There's limited border crossings, as we talked about. There's limited rail infrastructure. There's significant, I believe, labor problems that come in Mexico. And once we get across those, how do they get the vehicles here?
Yeah, and I think you've said 85 or 90% of what they produce in Mexico gets exported out of Mexico.
Correct.
And obviously there are serious infrastructure challenges with getting the vehicles out. And I think that presents a massive opportunity as much as a headache. And with that opportunity, I think we've already started to engage some of our customers about how do we solution through that.
But that was always a problem on container side. When the bulk of that trade was coming in from the Far East, all you saw were empties going back and empties going back. Well, it's a lot easier to throw an empty back on a ship. You still got to have a physical person drive an empty across the border.
And we've seen that OEMs are allowing us to be creative with how we can assist with bringing those vehicles across. I think everybody would prefer a 9-car vehicle hauler. It's more economical, but they are in limited supply everywhere, and Mexico is no different. There's only so many of those trailers, so providing unique trailer solutions to help bring those vehicles from the plants in Mexico over the border, and then allowing us to bring in our US-based carrier network to pick up and go to pretty much all 48 states in the United States has been really eye-opening, just to see how critical and fragile our supply chain is at the end of the day.
I'm looking forward to ALSC to hear from the OEMs, because I feel there's going to be some retraction on an EV basis at some point. I think that there's EV companies in that space now that are going to do very well, but I wonder if we're going to have the mass production that we envisioned maybe just a year or two ago, and whether we've heard from some of the OEMs where we may go take a step back and go to hybrids, which maybe have been the logical next step in the first place.
Yeah, I just read an article that EV production and sales this year will be the highest it's ever been, and that we used to have 21 models that could do 300 miles of range or more. They're up to something like 57 different models that exist that can do 300 miles or more, which only will potentially speed up the consumer adoption. But again, can they manufacture to meet demand?
Is the consumer going to pay the extra money for?
And that was the other byline in the article, was that they still average somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000 more versus a comparable ICE vehicle. And many consumers are not willing to pay the extra money, even though they're going to spend it in gas costs on the back end, potentially.
Yeah. And
I know here at RPM, we're proud to be sponsors with Automotive Logistics, because not only are we going to hear what's happening in North America this month, but we're going to be in Mexico in December and be able to hear from them what they feel is going to happen in 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, the Automotive Logistics Group through Ultimate Media, they do a great job. I'm always excited to hear from the panels. They put together great sessions, very robust topics, and it's also an opportunity for us to break off and talk with our customers, talk with our trucking company partners. I'm looking forward to it.